Welcome to this live cast on our future economies. Capitalism, despite the tremendous increase in worldwide welfare through its innovative power and freedom, has at the same time a number of negative consequences. A transition is necessary to overcome ecological destruction, decrease in quality of life, and growing inequality. Given geopolitical developments, Europe has an important role to play in this transition. In the livecasts, we will start an open dialogue and discuss this transition with internationally renowned economists from all over the world. Questions will pass by, such as: each week, we will discuss these matters with 2 economists, resulting in 10 online dialogues in 10 weeks, where we will share viewpoints and collect ideas on how capitalism's innovative and creative powers can go hand in hand with fostering an equal and just society. A different subject every week. Together we can build a basis for economies that are beneficial to all of us. You can participate by putting your questions and remarks in the chat. So, let's talk.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Professor Zingales, for being here with us tonight. Almost 50 years ago, Milton Friedman famously stated that the sole responsibility of a company is to increase its profits. Now, there has been a lot of debate about what Mr. Friedman actually meant when he said that, but it's quite possibly beyond doubt that Mr. Friedman's influence over the last 50 years has been pretty large on business and economics as well. In the US, the views of Mr. Friedman have become quite unpopular over time. Consider, for example, Mr. Sanders, Mrs. Warren. And also in our series, he was mentioned pretty often as an antagonist towards what we should be doing with our capitalist system. Why do you think his views have become more unpopular over time? And do you share the sentiment that I currently describe?
So first of all, let me start thanking you for inviting me, and start also with a little bit of an infomercial. At the Steeler Center, we have a online publication called Pro Market that hosted a very lively debate on Friedman 50 years later. And I think that I would draw from that debate to explain why I think that Friedman was where Friedman was right and where Friedman was wrong, and why there is so much resentment against Friedman today, because I think that where he was wrong has been deteriorated and need to be fixed. So I think that I'm very convinced that not only capitalism in general, but also the maximization of shareholders' value work fairly well when firms are both price takers and rule takers, and where there is an effective democracy in place. Let me explain this, what I mean. When I say price taker, means that they don't have market power, and that's something that a lot of people have emphasized. And to be honest, Friedman himself in 1962 emphasized. But the second is more important. What does it mean, rule takers? Is that they don't interfere in the democratic process in the setting up of rules. And in addition, there is something that Friedman does not emphasize, but I think is very important, is that for capitalists to work well, you need an active democratic process to work. So let me make an example that is dear and hard to most of you.
Yes.
Think about the problem of climate change and carbon tax. As economists, we know that the most effective way to fix this problem is to impose a carbon tax and to let firms maximize profits, because they're going to internalize the cost they produce in the environment through the carbon tax. So why don't we see more carbon tax? And I studied a bit, a very interesting example, because in the state of Washington, not only the government Isley that tried to pass it in the legislature and fail, but there were 2 referenda asking the population if they wanted a carbon tax. And actually, they both failed by a very substantial margin. And why did they fail? Part of it was a failure in politics, okay? Because the first proposal that was designed by an economist, actually, was very clever and introduced a carbon tax, but a reduction in the sales tax to make sure that the carbon tax was what we economists call revenue neutral. However, some very radical groups started to say that this was penalizing X, penalizing Y, penalizing Z. So they voted against and propaganda against the carbon tax, even if this was something that everybody recognized is a good step forward.
Yeah.
But second, in both referenda, companies, particularly BP and Chevron, put a lot of money to make sure that people did not get the fair representation of what the carbon tax represents. So I don't think that the best solution is to have every firm internalize naturally the cost of carbon tax. The best solution is to have a lively democratic process, but this lively democratic process cannot be interfered massively by firms. And this is, I think, where Milton Friedman to some extent got it wrong, because he says you have to maximize profits following rules and competition, but he did not anticipate or internalize the fact that those rules are designed by firms, and often they are designed by firms in a very distorting way. So the solution to me is get the firms out of the political business and let's the good democracy work.
Thank you. A lot of things in there which I'd like to discuss during the discussion part of tonight, but let's just focus for now on one of the issues that you mentioned. I believe in your book in 2012, A Capitalism for the People, you already mentioned the increase of lobbying power or the rule-making power of businesses. And you say that it doesn't help with the capitalist system in America, right? It's very compromising to as well. So how do you explain this increase in lobbying power?
I think there are a lot of reasons, and I only have a few seconds. So let me give you what I consider the biggest one. The biggest one is in the 60s and 70s. I don't remember the 60s. I was born in the 60s, but the 70s, I do remember them. In the 60s and 70s, what is considered the left or center left of the political spectrum was despising business. And by doing so, had, I think, a healthy separation from business. And that kept also the right wing or the center right more leery of being completely in the pocket of business. Over the 80s, and even more so in the 90s, everywhere in the world, this is not just a US phenomenon, it's just a UK phenomenon, it's not just a European phenomenon, is everywhere in the world. The center left went in bed with business. And what is the ultimate proof is retired center-left leaders became important lobbyists or members of this everywhere in the world, from Schroeder that goes and becomes chairman of Gazprom to Bill Clinton that is paid $1 million a pop to give speeches, to Blair, you name it, and they're all there. As a result, the competition in the political system was not based on who is more distant from business, but who gets more money from business. And as a result, I think that business got disproportionate influence. And the problem is that once this channel is available, then is in the interest of each individual business to play the game. And that's the reason why this should be regulated, this should be intervened by the political system. The problem is that democracy itself has been infected by this. So we need to fix democracy to fix cooperation, but if we don't fix cooperation, we don't fix democracy.
Yes. So let's park the lobbying part also as well for the discussion part. And there's an academic paper you wrote with Professor Oliver Hart in 2018, in which you try to bring together these two elements. You say, well, firms, they should in some way not focus on profit maximization in terms of shareholder value, but their wealth, right? So it's the welfare. The welfare is important for the shareholders, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So
what is the distinction between that?
It's very simple, to some extent trivial, but actually quite important. Well, if I ran my own firm, I'm 100% owner, I don't necessarily maximize profit, I maximize my utility. And so if I care about the environment, if I care about the community, if I care about climate change, I might reduce my profits. Exactly like the young economist was saying from the consumer point of view, but I spend a little bit more because I like a banana that is fair trade grown. I might actually decided to receive a little bit less profit in order to do something that I feel is important. Now, the society as it is structured today makes it impossible for corporations to receive this input from the shareholders. So the moment my company goes public, then all the people involved say they have to maximize profits and ignore the sorry that there is a noise in the back, but I cannot stop it. They need to they prevent shareholders to communicate to corporations what their social goals are. And I think that the research in the last couple of years that I've been doing with Oliver Hart is being really in the direction of saying, what can we do to make it easier? And one important distinction is we don't expect everybody to do so. We don't expect people to be forced, or we don't want people forced to do that. The only way to do it is through the democratic process. But at the very minimum, we don't want to prevent people with a heart to have their heart embedded in their investment choices. That is, to me, it seems a minimum level that even any libertarian should agree with.
So get corporations out of the democratic process, but maybe introduce some democratic elements within corporations, right? So how can a board of directors then maximize the welfare of a company's shareholder? What can they do, practically speaking?
Oh, I think it's very simple, is they just ask the shareholders what to do. If I give you an example that fortunately is not very relevant to Europe, but is very relevant in the United States. Several years ago, one shareholder of Walmart tried to put on the ballot a request to prohibit Walmart from selling AK-47, the machine guns that are used basically to do the mass shootings.
Yes.
And you know what? The board of Walmart refuses to have that vote. This shareholder appealed to the SEC. They went through the legal process. And basically, through the legal process, they were able to stop having that vote. Eventually, Walmart caved in, and they're not selling AK-47 anymore. But the point is, they didn't let the shareholders express their opinion. Yeah. And there is no doubt that selling AK-47 gives Walmart more profits. And however, there is no doubt that a lot of people, like your first economist, will be willing to sacrifice maybe a penny a share in dividends in order to make sure that there are fewer mass shootings. And so the simple point that Oliver and I make is, let shareholders express their opinion. We don't want this decision to be made by the board of directors because we appoint managers because they are good at running business, not because they're good at trading off social values with money. That decision is ultimately a shareholder's decision and should let them express their opinion.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for now, Professor Zingales.